It's late summer and, naturally, London is bustling on a Friday evening. Tourists are finishing their sightseeing, locals are relaxing at home or getting ready for a night out. Among them is a young woman who wants to go out for a drink with friends that evening. As she leaves her home, dusk is just falling. She wants to take a shortcut through a nearby park, as she has done many times before. But the young woman will never make it to her friends that evening. Sabina Nessa is 28 years old and works at a primary school in Lewisham, London. She graduated from the University of Greenwich and later from the University of Bedfordshire. Her parents are incredibly proud of her. They came to London from Bangladesh before Sabina and her 3 sisters were born, so their children could have better access to education. And their plan worked perfectly. Sabina found her passion in this field and has found her calling as a teacher. She loves her job, but working with young children is of course quite exhausting. That's why she's planning a relaxing evening at the pub after work on September 17th. It's just around the corner, only about a 5-minute walk away. As you probably know, there is a real pub culture in Great Britain, especially in England. For many people, stopping by for a few drinks or a delicious meal is basically part of their weekly routine. This is also the case for 28-year-old Sabina. And since it's Friday anyway, nothing stands in the way of a convivial evening with a few drinks. Sabina lives on Estill Road in Kidbrooke, a fairly quiet area of London. It's a little quieter there than in the city centre. Nevertheless, it has everything a big city has to offer. Sabina is meeting a friend at the Depot pub this evening, and a few other acquaintances may join them. The arrangement is rather informal, but Sabina is a fairly conscientious and punctual person, so she is determined to be there at the agreed time. However, she is running a little late this evening. That's why she doesn't walk along the main road as usual, but takes a shortcut through Catter Park. She usually makes sure to walk along main roads, especially in the evening. But she's in a hurry, and Catter Park is not too big or winding. It is located close to several residential buildings and is particularly popular with families. The park has a large playground, but also relatively untouched nature with wild grasses and bushes. And it is precisely behind one of these bushes that Sabina's body will be found the next day. When she isn't looking, a man suddenly jumps out and hits her with a metal object. 34 times. Sabina Nessa has no chance of surviving. When a passerby finds Sabina's body in some bushes in Catter Park, he initially thinks she is only unconscious, until he sees how badly she is injured. The police arrive within minutes, but there is nothing they can do for the 28-year-old. Sabina Nessa died from her injuries the night before. In addition to severe injuries from being struck with a blunt object, she was also strangled. This was probably the ultimate cause of death. There are no forensic traces on her body that could lead to the perpetrator. Fortunately, however, the park is monitored by CCTV. And although it was already dark at the time of the crime, the perpetrator made a crucial mistake. I already mentioned that the murder weapon was a metal object. But not just any metal object. It was a reflective traffic triangle. That's why, despite the darkness, the reflection of the murder weapon can be seen on the camera footage. In the days that follow, the police work around the clock to evaluate additional cameras in the vicinity of the park. This enables them to find increasingly better images of the perpetrator until they are eventually able to compile a proper description of him. A 38-year-old man from Lewisham is briefly arrested. However, the suspicion against him is not substantiated, so the man is released and the hunt for Sabina's killer continues. The officers secure hundreds of hours of video footage, and on one of these tapes, they finally find a decisive lead. It shows the suspect walking toward a car, a Nissan Micra, with the murder weapon in his hand. The car's license plate is clearly visible on the camera footage, and the movement profile is enough to issue an arrest warrant for the owner of the vehicle. In the middle of the night, police storm an apartment in Eastbury, England. The suspect is Koji Selamaj, who is arrested without resistance. He doesn't say anything at first, but the sneakers the police find in his apartment speak volumes. They have blood spatters on them that later analysis clearly identifies as belonging to the murdered Sabina Nessa. Koji Selamaj is 36 years old and originally from Albania. As a teenager, he moved to Greece, then to England as a young man. There, he ekes out a living as a pizza delivery man and doing odd jobs. He does not live in the capital London, but in the coastal town of Eastbury. Through witness statements and phone records, the police are able to reconstruct the perpetrator's daily routine. On September 17th, the day of the murder, Koji booked a hotel room at the Grand Hotel in Eastbury. You may be wondering why he booked a hotel in his hometown. The reason is that his wife, from whom he is separated, works at this very hotel. She only managed to leave Koji in the summer of 2021. I use the word managed because he had repeatedly been violent towards her and had also strangled her on several occasions. This creates two problems for Koji Selamaj. The first is that he loses his wife, and the second is that he also potentially loses his residence permit. All of this is happening after Brexit. Koji only has a residence permit in England because his wife is Romanian and therefore an EU citizen. Under the EU settlement scheme, EU citizens who do not have British citizenship can remain in England after Brexit. This right also extends to spouses. This means that Koji Selamaj is allowed to live in England because of his marriage to his wife, even though he himself is not an EU citizen. To put it bluntly, if the divorce goes through, Koji may well have to leave England. He's now under considerable pressure, albeit of his own making, because, as mentioned above, he has been violent towards his wife on several occasions. When he suddenly shows up at her workplace as a customer on September 17th, she naturally panics and an argument breaks out. An employee even calls the emergency services. The emergency services speak briefly with the employee, but he manages to defuse the situation over the phone, so no patrol car is sent to the hotel. Koji Selamaj eventually checks into the hotel. When he leaves his room, he runs into his ex again in the hotel parking lot. He asks her to sleep with him, but she naturally refuses. Koji Selamaj then drives away in his Nissan. First, Koji drives from Eastbourne to Brighton, then to the southeast of London. He parks his car at Peakler Square in Kidbrooke. It is assumed that he came to London with the firm intention of committing a crime. He buys a rolling pin in a branch of Sainsbury's supermarket. The police suspect that he may have intended to use the kitchen utensil as a weapon for a violent act. Koji then hangs around Kidbrooke until, at dusk, he sees Sabina Nessa on her way to the pub. When she turns into the park, Koji follows her. When there are no passers-by nearby, he strikes. However, he does not use the rolling pin, but a warning triangle, the kind found in every car's trunk. He hits Sabina more than 30 times. Then he drags her into some bushes, pulls down her clothes, and strangles her there. When Sabina is dead, he simply leaves her there. Although there are no signs of sexual assault on her body, the police assume that the crime was sexually motivated. After all, he had rejected his ex that afternoon when she asked him to sleep with her. After the crime, Koji drives back home. On the way, he stops in Kent to throw the warning triangle into a river. Shortly after midnight, he's back at the Grand Hotel in Eastbourne and simply goes to his room as if nothing had happened. At first, Koji remains silent when questioned by the police. Only after several interrogations does he decide to confess. However, he only says what is absolutely necessary. As a result, the exact motive for the crime against Sabina remains unknown to this day and will probably always remain so. Koji Selamaj's defense attempts to avert the charges by admitting that Koji is guilty of Sabina's death, but denies that he murdered her. This would leave room for Sabina's death to have been an accident, or the act to have been manslaughter, but not murder. Ultimately, however, Koji pleads guilty to murder and is sentenced to 36 years in prison. However, he's not present in the courtroom when the sentence is handed down. In doing so, he shirks his responsibility to at least face Sabina's surviving relatives. Instead, Koji's sister and father traveled from Albania especially to attend the court hearing. In this way, at least they want to pay their respects to Sabina Nessa's surviving relatives. After Sabina's murder, several vigils are held in London, attended by hundreds of people, including some high-ranking politicians. The murder triggers a major debate about women's safety in London. Sabina was murdered by pure chance. Her killer had no personal motive and did not even perceive Sabina as a person, but only as a potential victim for his violent act. Shortly after Sabina's murder, the mayor of London described daily violence against women as a kind of epidemic. The case later made headlines mainly because it was initially hardly reported. In similar cases where the victims have no obvious migrant background, the coverage is often more extensive. It was only after considerable pressure from social media that the murder of Sabina Nessa was reported more widely. It should be noted that this was even while her killer was still at large. After Sabina's murder, her sister Sabina Islam became involved in campaigning against violence against women and raising awareness of femicide and everyday dangers. She's also involved in a major feminist campaign by the BBC. On this occasion, she shared a quote she found in Sabina's notebook after her sister's murder. "Love yourself more than anyone else on this planet." That brings us to the end of today's video. Unfortunately, I've already made videos about many similar cases, about crimes that only happened because the victims were women. But it's important to talk about this issue, and I hope I'm doing my part. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and if you have any suggestions for a video, please leave them in the comments as well. By doing so, you'll also be supporting Insolito because any interaction increases the likelihood that the video will be recommended to people who haven't subscribed to Insolito yet. Other than that, there's not much more to say. I wish you a good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on when you're watching the video, and hope to see you again in the next video. Until then, ciao everyone.